creating a virtual machine. See, now that we have created a complete virtual network, and of course the virtual network, we have decided to have two subnets, front end subnet and back end subnet. And also we have created network security group for restricting the inbound and outbound traffic on both front end and back end subnets. It's now time to create a virtual machine in a given subnet. So we go to the portal. You have to go to the portal and log in. I've already logged into the portal here. Once we are here, now go to virtual machines and let's say add. We create a new virtual machine. Now there are a lot of ready-made images for creating a virtual machine. You can create a simple Windows virtual machine. You can create a Red Hat Linux, Ubuntu server. You can also create a Windows virtual machine with SQL Server ready-made on top of it. Like that, if you want to use Docker containers, you have a ready-made virtual machine for that. So on and on. There are different images which are available. So a lot of images here in the gallery are by Microsoft, and there are images even by third parties over here which are added to the Microsoft gallery. So you have to choose one among them. You see SAP is also there now, and so on. Pretty huge. And it's more, it's not just this. You can click on more and go to a lot more on internet. Ideally search for whatever you are interested over here. So now I go to Windows Server, and there are different versions of Windows Server. We can choose the one we want. So right now I want the Windows Server with UI. Here you see a lot of Windows Server versions are there even without UI. For example, Nano Server. Nano Server doesn't give you any user interface. It is good enough for probably creating something like a container server. We can put our containers on top of it and execute. So no direct user interface for managing it. So Windows Server 2016 data center small disk. Windows Server 2016 data center, a full-fledged Windows server manageable using UI is what is this. So I'm choosing that at this point of time. Click on create. Now here you see there are two deployment models. One is the classic deployment model and the other is resource manager deployment model. Now I am not even sure why Microsoft is today supporting classic deployment model. It's already outdated long back. If suppose you have created a virtual machine using a old portal which is completely outdated now, then you would probably want to go for classic. But otherwise, in all circumstances, you should go for resource manager virtual machine, and there are a lot of additional benefits on top of classic. So let's say we choose the default there, resource manager, go to create. Now here we have a lot of options. We'll mention one option at a time. So first is basic, the basic category. I'm supposed to provide a name to my virtual machine. I'm going to actually create now as an example here two web servers, and between these two web servers I'm going to have one load balancer. So let me call this as web VM1, and you can put a shortcut VM, web VM1. What type of disk you want to use, SSD, HDD. Basically you have the choice. SSD obviously will be faster but little expensive. HDD will be slower but cheaper in price. So if at all there are a lot of input output operations which you have to perform, disk input output operations you have to perform in your virtual machine, in such kind of circumstances it is always recommended to go for SSD, though it would cost you little extra. We are now supposed to provide username and password using which we are supposed to connect to that virtual machine. So I give it as DSS admin and some password. I practice this standard. I always keep my password like this. P uppercase, password @123, because there is a rule. The password should have at least one alphabet, which is uppercase, one lowercase, one symbol, one digit. So I created this password and I use this for all my sessions while practicing. Many times it happens that you people create virtual machine, you forget password, and then you have to change the password before you log in again. So remember this password before you forget. I mean, write somewhere and store it. Use the resource group. I'll use the same resource group which I have used for creating my virtual network. Location, yes, my virtual network is in South India. My virtual machine also is in South India. Now, this is something very interesting. If you already have a license of Windows, you can key in that license and you are going to save 40% of your cost. Save up to 40% with license you already own. For on-premise, suppose you already have a license. That license key can be keyed in and then you will save that additional cost. You have to only mention what type of license it is. I confirm that I'm an eligible Windows license, blah 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 blah. But right now I'm choosing no, I don't have a license. I'll click on OK. So whatever charges will be applied to me will be for both the virtual machine physical hardware as well as the software license of Windows. Click on OK. Now we have to choose the right size for our virtual machine. There are different types of sizes. The place where it is star is the recommended virtual machine for the selected workload which we have used for the image. So I have chosen Windows image. For Windows image, Microsoft is recommending to use these virtual machines. They're of different sizes and different cost, you see, huge. And we are not talking about sizes and cost and all this at this point of time, though we'll have a detailed discussion there. So let us sort by cost and then we can choose whichever is best suited for us. So I'll choose yes, what is recommended by Microsoft for my purpose, where I have 3.5 GB RAM, 4 data disks will be allowed, 3200 input output operations per second, 7 GB of local SSD, and it is a standard edition. I mean, these are all standard. I'm just choosing this. Yes, for you people, if you have little lesser amount in your credit, you can choose one cheaper also, doesn't really matter. So I select 4179.93. That is all rupees. In my case, these are all in rupees. Based on your location, based on what address you have given, the amount will be shown to you in that respective currency. So click on select. Size is selected. Now we have to provide additional configuration. There is something called as availability zone, that is anyhow not available in the zone which I have selected, that is India. And moreover, we are not even discussing about this or this at this point of time. There is availability zone and availability set. Please keep it empty at this point of time. When we discuss in detail about Azure virtual machine, we will come back and touch these topics. Then we have use managed disk. Now Microsoft is giving two types of disks. One they call it as managed disks and the other is of course unmanaged. Now what is the difference? See, whenever we are creating a virtual machine, a VHDX file is going to be created. In context of Azure, it is VHD file. Now this VHD file has to be stored somewhere. If you say no, like it was in the olden days, the VHD file was supposed to be stored in a storage account, which is another service created for us. One storage account has to be created and we have to provide the information about that storage account. and we are responsible for managing the storage account. We are responsible for managing that blob which is created for the VHD file. But if we choose for managed disk, we don't have to worry about the storage account. This is all meaningless now. Microsoft is internally going to manage the disk for us. The advantage is in we managing the disk, we are limited by the limitation of storage account. The number of input output operations which every storage account support is limited. But when we let Microsoft manage the disk, the number of IO operations will not be limited and it will be a better option at any point of time. So more on this again to come later. So I'm not changing, I'm just keeping all the options as default here. Here we have to choose the most important thing, that is the virtual network, in which VNet we want to create a virtual machine. We have only one, so let's choose that only. Under that VNet, a virtual machine has to be created under a given subnet. So that subnet also we will have to choose here. So this is the range of my subnet. After that, the public IP address comes into the picture. Now in public IP address, we have to provide a name which is going to be given to the IP. There will be name which is going to be given to the IP, which will be assigned to the virtual machine. But let me clarify, the IP will not be directly assigned to the virtual machine. I'm going to show you little later that this IP will be used for creating a network interface card, and network interface card will be attached to the virtual machine. I'm going to explain and demonstrate that also. But whatever name is there right now is good enough. I'll just choose that as it is. SK is just how the load balancer we are going to use. Don't worry about this. But what is important is when we choose here, something is wrong. This is gone. Let us come back again. Create new. There is a bug. In UI there is a bug. If I change to standard, this is going, but when it comes here, it should come back, which is not happening. So that's okay. Right now we are only concerned about whether we want a dynamic IP or we want a static IP. We can decide here. Even if I choose IP which is static, I will not be in position to specify what IP. It's a public IP. Microsoft, from the available list of IP addresses, at this point of time will reserve one IP for this virtual machine, and it will remain same for all the sessions of the virtual machine. Even if you shut down and restart, the IP would be same if I am using static. But of course, if I choose dynamic, IP will not be assigned at this point of time. When we start the virtual machine, at that time the IP will be assigned to it. And when we stop, the virtual machine will release the IP. And when we restart, we again get a probably new IP altogether. So if at all you are interested in using that IP in your client applications or in other services, then you have to ensure that you always go for static IP. Click on OK. Network security group. I told you, if you remember, we can create network security group for a subnet, but we can also create for a virtual machine. Because we have already created an NSG for virtual machine for subnet, we can actually remove from here. You see, these are the options. No public inbound ports. HTTP should be allowed. HTTPS should be allowed. And of course, SSH is for Linux machines. RDP should be allowed. MS SQL Server. These are most common inbound rules which are allowed. That's why now Microsoft has listed here itself. Earlier it was not like that. Earlier we had to explicitly add these protocols. Manually we had to do it, but now they provided this shortcut. Of course, you can go to advanced and then choose here and specify an already existing NSG or create a new one with the required rules. But in my case, I have switched from basic to advanced and I say none. I don't want an NSG at the machine level because I have already created NSG at the subnet level. To avoid confusion at this point of time, I don't want NSG at machine level and subnet level. Let us keep it at subnet level only so that I can easily demonstrate how it is working for you people. There is some concept of virtual machine extensions. These are basically used for installing additional softwares when the virtual machine is provisioned. Right now we are not doing this also. We have a feature where on every day 7 p.m. if configured, my virtual machine will shut down. You can simply enable that feature, but if you know your virtual machine has to run 24/7, in such case change it to off. If they are developer virtual machines, on the assumption that developer would probably leave at 7 p.m. in the evening, he can do something like that because he doesn't need to be there, and when he is not there, why should the billing continue? So he can always switch off the virtual machine, shut down the virtual machine at that particular point of time when he leaves the job, end of the day. You can set the time zone as well. And one email will be sent in case I set it here that the virtual machine has been shut down. To this particular email ID, the email is going to be sent. Boot diagnosis. Now sometimes what happens is the virtual machine is not starting. Now if virtual machine is not starting, how should I know what is the problem? I cannot go to Microsoft data center and see what exactly is the issue. Either I raise a ticket to Microsoft, which is of course going to cost us extra, or we read the boot diagnosis. It is basically nothing but certain images which are captured and logged in background in the storage account. For this also we will need a storage account in which all my images which are captured will be stored. So if in case the machine is not booting, we obviously cannot do a remote desktop login. After the machine has started, if there is any problem, we can always get into the virtual machine using RDP and then figure out through logs, event logs, system logs, application logs. There are different types of logs. We can always read those logs and figure out what went wrong. But here the situation is the machine is not even starting. So when machine is not starting, how do I know what is the problem? Yes, I can go to the storage account and I can see different images which are there, which were captured at the time of booting. So do you want to enable that boot diagnosis? It's your choice. If at all you are doing a production machine, yes, you should keep it as enabled. Otherwise you would lose that machine if in case there is a problem and you cannot recover. But right now I'm disabling it. I just don't want that don't want that storage account to get additionally created. So like that, guest OS diagnostics, this is nothing but after booting, if you want to capture some kind of diagnostic information, this is before booting and this is after booting. I am not interested in this also. Managed service identity. If suppose this virtual machine is going to access certain user identity within the network from Azure Active Directory, then you have to enable it. Otherwise, don't worry about this. Do you want to enable backup of this virtual machine? We can actually configure a backup, for which we have to create a backup vault, recover service vault, and there is a big procedure for it which we are going to discuss separately. So most of the options over here, I just took it as it is. Right now, let me clarify, I am not actually teaching you virtual machine. I'm just creating a virtual machine for demonstration of how load balancer can work. But in detail about each of these aspects, we are going to work with when we move on to virtual machine chapter separately. So I chose almost all options as default. This I changed, and the other I changed is NSG. I changed it from whatever was default to none. I moved to advanced tab and changed it to none. Now click on OK. Summary will be shown to us that this is going to happen. Now I decide I want to change something because I want to demonstrate load balancing. I would also want to use availability set. I'll explain what is availability set little later. But right now I'm creating a new availability set. So basically availability set is going to contain multiple virtual machines, and Azure will ensure that at least one of them is always up and running. That is actually the basic purpose of availability set. So if I have 5 virtual machines, Microsoft Azure is compulsory going to ensure that at least one of them will be always up and running, so the traffic from the client is not regretted. So here I'll call it as web server availability set. There is something called as fault domain, update domain. All these things are different, which we need to discuss. I don't want to dump a lot of things at this point of time. I kept it as simple as possible. But again, I'm giving you confirmation. All these things with proper theory, proper concepts, we are going to cover more in detail when we specifically discuss about the virtual machines chapter. So validation has been passed. Now we are ready to create a virtual machine. If you want Microsoft to contact you, then only put a check mark. This is not a license agreement that you have to compulsory check. No, this is not. I just give permission to use and share my contact information so that Microsoft or the provider can contact me regarding this product and related products. So as soon as you put a check mark and send and say create, after some time you will get a mail from Microsoft asking you about the feedback of your experience on Azure. And this will take a while now for the virtual machine to get created, and we have no choice but to wait. But in the meantime, let me create one more virtual machine very quickly. I need two. This is web VM1. I'll add one more. Same machine, same configuration, same operating system, everything same. I'll have two. I'll call this as web VM2. Everything is same. I'll just actually create a clone of an already created virtual machine. I'll choose the same size also, though it is not mandatory. Go to advanced. Say I'm not interested in NSG. So select none. Notification disabled, boot diagnostics, all fine. Click on OK. No, one more thing. I would choose an existing availability set. So whatever availability set was created before, the same availability set has to be selected. So both the virtual machines belong to the same availability set. So either of these two will be available at any point of time. See, to provide redundancy of your application. So I'm going to put same application on these two virtual machines now. Click on OK. And click on create. both the virtual machines will take some time before they are ready to remote login. So right now I have one here, but this is also in creating state. After a while, the other also becomes available and both will be creating for some time. So we have now both the virtual machines created. You can actually see both of them. Both are created and running. You can just go to any one of these virtual machines. There is a public IP address, but where do I see private IP address? Go to networking, and here you will find network interface card which is created, and we did not give this name. It has automatically chosen that name, and we don't have ability to give that name, especially when we are creating through portal. So now I click on this network interface card, go to IP configurations, and here you see there is a private IP and there is a public IP. If you are developing something like a virtual appliance, a virtual machine which is responsible for taking the input traffic and forwarding it to the network further, then you'll have to enable IP forwarding. At this point of time, that's not needed. Ours is just a web server and we want to absorb all the requests, no forwarding concept. So we have private IP, we have public IP. Private IP is dynamic, public IP we have chosen as static. And that's the name, this is the name. But remember, IP itself is a separate resource otherwise. And you can see here effective security rules. I told you there can be multiple, has no associated network security group. Yes, when I created the virtual machine, I did not choose any network security group. That's why it is not showing any network security group. But if I go to virtual machine, this is virtual machine. For the virtual machine, there are rules. Where are these rules coming from? Subnet to which this virtual machine belongs to. From there, these rules are coming from. Inbound and outbound. Both the virtual machines will have same rules because both of them belong to the same subnet and both of them do not have any local network security group. This is one. Two, by chance if you forget the password, you have ability to change the password somewhere here. Reset the password. You'll have to give the username and password once again. So this is going to become your new RDP account for logging into that virtual machine. Like the one which I have used, DSS admin and then password @123. In case I forget, which guarantee you are going to do, you'll have to come here and use it. So a lot of these options we are going to see later. But right now, yes, I have a virtual machine and it is ready. And we can go to a particular virtual machine, use the option connect. Click on connect. And we have two options for connecting. I can do an SSH session, which generally we do for Linux virtual machines, Linux servers, or you can simply do a RDP login, especially applicable for Windows box. Both of them can be used for both the types of operating system. So click on open, say connect. RDP connection software is getting executed on my machine. I provide more choice. Change, this is the default account with which I have logged on to my machine. I don't want that. We have given a different name. DSS admin, password @123. Click on OK. Say yes. Certificate issue, that's fine. And we are in. pretty fast. You can as well log into the other virtual machine at the same time. Just minimize this, change it, connect, same story, open, connect, click on OK. So we have two virtual machines. And you see the IP address are different. 3389:3389. That's the port number which is used by RDP. This is starting with 52 series. This is starting with 13 series. And it's not in our control. Microsoft has decided to give that public IP, and we are using that for remote desktop login from our local machine. Local PC machine to be precise. So server manager is there. Now by default, these virtual machines which are created, they do not have any IIS server installed on it. So I would like to install that IIS server. So add roles and features. Click on next, next, next. And here we have web server IIS. Click on next. This is the beauty of Windows. If you are doing Linux, you'll have to execute some shell commands. Simple, straightforward, and all done. Like that, let's also initiate the same thing on the other one. On both the virtual machines, I'm trying to install IIS. Server manager is still not ready. We'll have to wait for a couple of minutes before it becomes ready. Yeah, now that we have got these tabs, it's ready. Same procedure. I'm just creating clone. Same story. IIS, add feature, next, and finish. Nothing else. I'm not interested in any other feature. So why are we installing IIS on these machines? IIS is the Microsoft web server. It is this particular server which is responsible for consuming all the HTTP requests. Like we have got Apache, Tomcat, and so many other servers are there. Microsoft has their own product, that is IIS on Windows box. If I have used Linux box, I would have installed Apache on it. Let's see what is the status of the previous virtual machine. Yeah, it's done. So in the first virtual machine, IIS is installed. I go here now. When IIS is installed, the website by default which is created will be in c:/inetpub www root. So this is the default file which is going to be rendered. So just to distinguish that the request is coming from this virtual machine or that virtual machine, let me put here a number. One. That's all. This image will come in the browser actually. And likewise, I go to the other virtual machine, and here also I have inetpub, internet publications, www root, and here I'll put 2. So we have both the virtual machines ready. Now how to visit them? Let's go back to our local machine first. My desktop. Here in browser, I'm supposed to provide the IP address. So close this, copy this IP address and put it here. So HTTP request is sent to that virtual machine. We are not able to connect. Something is wrong. We'll have to figure out what went wrong. Let us see if the same problem exists with the other virtual machine also. And if both are giving same problem, then it is NSG which is an issue. This is working fine. So NSG may not be the problem. Maybe IIS is not started at that point of time. This is 1. 2 is not available. Something went wrong in 2. We'll have to figure out. So first I'll check is in virtual machine 2. I have IIS available. So let's go to the local browser here within the virtual machine. Within the virtual machine, I'm going to the browser and I'll see if within the virtual machine I'm able to access the website. So for that, http://localhost. Fine. Here it is fine. So web server is not a problem. For sure. Let's try once again. Virtual machine 2. Networking. HTTP allow is there. This is already good. Inward traffic is not reaching there. Here there is something wrong. The issue is I have two network security groups now. The one which is associated with the front end subnet, and the other is the one which is attached to the network interface card, and the one which is here inbound here, this is inbound rules, network interface card. But I remember disabling this, but it did not happen probably. Network security group with NSG, that is this NSG attached with this network interface card. And here we do not have HTTP allow. That is the problem. This is the problem. So though the inbound rule at front end subnet has allowed access, this has allowed. But the problem is after this it has to also be taken care by the network interface card. Network interface card is denying access to all the protocols here. So effectively front end subnet has allowed, the NSG associated with subnet has allowed, but the virtual machine server is rejecting it. So what should I do now? Either I add an inbound rule here, like here, to allow HTTP, or else let us go to network interface card and the network security group of the network interface card, edit this and select this as none. This got created additionally. Click it, none, and save it. Now once you have done this, just wait for a couple of minutes. It should save this, and after that maybe a minute more. Just come back now to WebVM2 networking, and you should see that there is only one set of inbound and outbound rules. We don't have two sets. And now go to the IP request. We should get the page. Now there should not be any problem because we have removed that. Just 1 minute it might take before that settings get saved. Wait for a minute and then come back, and you should see that now it is all well, and we have it. So web server 1 and web server 2, both the web servers are up and running now. We have completely configured our virtual network to have two independent web servers which are allowing HTTP and RDP access, that is port number 80 and port number 3389 access, and on both of them I could do remote desktop login and install IIS. That's all for now, and more about this, basically about how we can do load balancing, we will discuss in next session. Thank you.